Stan Mitchell is going to tell us everything we need to know about CPS financing, CPS Energy.
Bob gave you 15 minutes. Ordinarily, it takes me 15 minutes to clear my throat. So I'll make an exception. And he said 10 minutes for questions, so if you got any questions, shot them down. I have a script in front of me, so I won't lose my place if you interrupt. Good morning. My name is Stan Mitchell. I'm the numbers guy for the Streetcar Coalition. And we successfully resisted Via's streetcar project. You should have a blue sheet and a white sheet in front of you. And we'll be reviewing those as we proceed. Today we will be working at the intersection of politics and economics. A great man has said, quote, "Politics endures one term, economics is forever," unquote. Actually, I just made that up, but it summarizes our issue this morning. Both streetcar and smart grid projects are long-term political responses to short-term political pressure, ignoring long-term economic reality. Let me repeat that mouthful. Both streetcar and smart grid projects are long-term political responses to short-term political pressure, ignoring long-term economic reality. Let's talk about that economic reality. I understand you've been alerted to several smart grid concerns, but this will be your first exposure to the economic aspects of the project. I have shared the assessment in your blue sheet and much more with CPS staff, a process that began with the January 31st open records request from President Beneby, targeting smart grid economics, and continuing through 3 meetings with CPS staff, April 10th, August 3rd, and August 26th. Your blue sheet shows that CPS knowingly misrepresented smart grid project economics to our city council. As recently as August 19th, CPS did not know how much smart grid would cost and what it would do to our utility bills. How do you contrast a representation of the city council, which your blue sheet indicates is going to be a $290 million investment with a 12-year payback, with a final resolution at the bottom that says, hey gang, there is no project payback. And in fact, based on areas of omissions that we've been able to quantify, we're going to be $285 million in the hole, and there are other aspects that haven't been addressed. I don't know what the definition of fraud is, but I think we're getting pretty close to it. The blue sheet numbers tell us a 4-part story. The first part, it reveals bureaucratic abuse. Second, it exposes a hidden cost of renewable energy. Third, it suggests an action plan. And fourth, it puts us on the right side of history. Let's talk about bureaucratic abuse. Smart grid can be called son of streetcar. Compare these subjects. Scope. I'm going to be using my hands here to represent streetcar and smart grid. Streetcar was a $280 million starter route. It grew substantially since then. Smart grid is a $290 million investment that drastically understates the scope of the project, as you'll see from the blue sheet. Concerning relative policies, an unelected VIA Board of Trustees acted on political direction from VIA Chairman Henry Munoz, Judge Nelson Wolf, and Mayor Julian Castro, who wanted streetcars. That's the policy. For our smart grids, Doyle Beneby, through his unelected CPS Board of Trustees, facilitated Obama's political policy. Quote, when I get done regulating coal, utility rates will necessarily skyrocket, unquote. That's the policy. And we're going to see a lot more of that. The city staff was involved in road projects for a streetcar. City staff, led by Cheryl Scully and Ben Gorzell, performed, quote, due diligence, unquote, on Via's streetcar proposal. Deputy City Manager Pat DiGiovanni then recommended streetcar to City Council, committing fraud by omission. That's a pretty serious charge. The blue sheet summarizes Chris Eugster's misrepresentation of smart grid economics to City Council, with Cheryl Scully and Ben Gorzell in attendance providing tacit approval of the project. What does it cost? City staff would never answer the question, quote, how much more will it cost to own and operate a streetcar than the buses they would replace, unquote. We don't know that to this day. Pressed for details, CPS staff confesses they have no idea how much smart grid will cost or what impact it will have on our utility rates. On the action front, Mayor Taylor responded to our coalition's 27,000 petition signatures and shelved the streetcar project. We are looking forward to sharing smart grid misrepresentations with Mayor Taylor and proposing a plan of corrective action. But in both cases, gang, we still got hosed. The streetcar project cost us taxpayers $17.2 million in sunk costs, according to outgoing Chairman Alex Persino, 17.2. But there was another $368 million in matching funds tied to a $92 million in ATD funds laundered through the Department of Transportation. So we sacrificed $368 million in road funding through the clever money laundering initiated by Henry Munoz and Judge Nelson Wolf in cooperation with the Department of Transportation. Now, if you've got plans for something similar and want to reap similar benefit, here's how it works. You take $92 million check from ATD, which is designated for roads. You get your buddy to go with you to the Department of Transportation and say, hey, we'll give you this $92 million from ATD if you'll give me $92 million from the Department of Transportation. Now we've got $92 million from the Department of Transportation. It's not designated for roads, and we can spend it on streetcar. The problem is, those ATD funds were subject to matching grants. Typically a 20% grant means that that $92 million had $368 million of potential highway funds. We wonder why we're running out of highway funds? Go talk to Nelson Wolf. He knows exactly how to work, and he's done nothing to reverse it. Now, for CPS, the blue sheet documents $285.5 million negative cash flow over CPS's 20-year forecast period, but there's more, much more, and it's spelled out on the blue sheet. I won't take time to go over it. I hope it's self-explanatory. Reaching back to when some of you were younger, President Calvin Coolidge addressed bureaucratic abuse in 1926. Quote, of all forms of government, those administrated by bureaus are about the least satisfactory to an enlightened and progressive people. Being irresponsible, they become autocratic. And being autocratic, they resist all development. Unless bureaucracy is constantly resisted, it breaks down representative government and overwhelms democracy. It is the one element in our institution that sets up the pretense of having authority over everybody and being responsible to nobody, unquote. That's where San Antonio is today. First, VIA and their streetcars, CPS and their smart meters. Can saws be far behind? The second thing the blue sheet does is expose a hidden cost of renewable energy. Let's review the white sheet, comparing conventional renewable energies and the supply and demand related to it. Doyle Beneby inherited the old CPS. That's the upper graph, portraying for a representative day a supply-demand gap between a reliable, low-cost, predictable baseload, that's the lower line, that's produced from nuclear, coal, and gas-fired sources, and a highly predictable demand, a gap filled by higher cost, controllable, easy on, easy off, conventional power sources. Mr. Beneby has been continually increasing the share of CPS power generated by renewable sources, characterized by the lower graph, with a supply-demand gap between an erratic, unpredictable, distributed, relatively high-cost baseload supply from renewable wind and solar and the same highly predictable daily demand we saw in the upper graph. I wonder what our solar collectors are generating for us today. At least they're getting cleaned, aren't they? To minimize this costly gap, CPS must now spend more to control the demand line. That's what the smart grid will do, because renewable supply, the bottom line, is increasingly unmanageable as its share of CPS power grows. CPS now must not only manage inputs from solar and wind farms, but from thousands of solar rooftops producing energy for which CPS reimburses customers. Talk about complexity. Combining the higher relative cost of acquiring power generated by wind and solar, especially when government subsidies are recognized, and a higher cost of using that power as reflected in the exorbitant cost of the smart grid, we pay twice for renewable energy. Power costs increase, disproportionately burdening the lower income cohorts of our population. 3, what action does the blue sheet suggest? What can we do? Who can effectively challenge the CPS city staff power block? Right, there's only one person, and isn't that the insular nature of bureaucracy? Citizens have no direct input. Mayor Taylor is the only city official elected by all the people of San Antonio. We are seeking an appointment with her to make 2 points. First, CPS, abetted by city staff, has misrepresented smart grid economics to us citizens through elected city council representatives. You have that information before you in the blue sheet. And that detail is enhanced by this spreadsheet that compares the inputs that CPS provided and the other items which they omitted, the cost of money, for example. And second, the mayor must have a skilled, experienced, expensive financial expert as a direct report to hold the city staff accountable. Do you realize how vulnerable our city council is? Everything that their principal job is to spend money, right? Wisely, they represent areas of the city and bring those needs to a central point, and a committee decides how to apportion this, guided by a city staff that has its own agenda. And in the process, we have evidence that that city staff has burned the city twice with streetcar and now a smart grid costing taxpayers millions. It's time to blow the whistle. Consider your own situation. I don't know which of you is a CPA. I don't know which of you is a financial analyst. But what if you tomorrow were elected to the city council and Cheryl Scully, supported by Doyle Beneby and their crew, came to you and said smart grid's a good deal? Would you have spent the better part of a year determining how false that is? Based on what qualifications? We're talking about shopkeepers and housewives on the city council. They are unwitting dupes to the establishment. Maybe Calvin Coolidge had it right. The tyranny of the bureaucracy is causing all of this pain. Fourth item, the blue sheet will tell us, is that political forces are beginning to acknowledge economic reality. President Obama's renewables at any cost policy has found expression in the EPA's Clean Power Plan. The Attorney General of West Virginia, backed by AGs in 15 other states, plans to sue the EPA over its draconian demands. You can pick up the September 21st report on the subject on your way home. I have them for you. And Congressman Lamar Smith said at his April 9, 2015 EPA Regulation Roundtable in Kerrville, quote, "The public has a right to know about the drastic and costly regulations that the EPA is crafting behind closed doors," unquote. This is the same EPA that is the source of the Kool-Aid Doyle Beneby has been sipping. Any questions?
Yeah, okay, as far as Beneby, I think you're being a little kind to him. I know, because by saying that he's sipping, I can't say for sure, but what is your feeling? Do you think Beneby, I mean, isn't he like leading the way?
Nikki is a friend, but she's not a plant, honestly.
No.
I wrote myself a question because I knew there'd be no interest in this topic. My question to myself was, what's the view from 30,000 feet? CPS management has been investing our money based on ideologically driven political considerations. One, Mr. Beneby resigned from CPS Energy to head New Generation Power International, a renewable energy company. Why would he leave his long working career in the utility industry to join a firm promoting renewable alternatives that cost more than conventional energy generation if he did not hold a, quote, renewables at any cost, unquote, ideology? Second, Beneby's policy at CPS allows green projects to avoid the conventional requirement for competitive bidding by contractors. You don't know this, but both smart grid contractors, Landis & Gear and Silver Spring Networks, were exempt from the competitive bid requirement per CPS policy. Who makes CPS policy? Doyle Beneby and a compliant, unelected board of trustees. Treating renewable projects differently than conventional energy project is prima facie evidence of bias. Third, Mr. Beneby abruptly replaced Landis & Gear as vendor for the 2010-2011 40,000 meter market test of the LNG grid stream system. Were you aware of that 40,000 test?
The pilot program?
Pilot program,
Yeah.
But Beneby abruptly ended that test following a private meeting with Silver Spring President Scott Lang. Oops. 4, Mr. Beneby permitted the fraudulent representation of smart grid economics to City Council we have just reviewed. He cooked the books to make smart grid look smart. How many other CPS long-term major capital spending decisions have been driven by politics politics that may not persist more than one term, politics accompanied by myriad governmental subsidies. The Smart Grid study reveals how little we know about the mix of political and economic components of earlier decisions. Solar and wind energy, how much more do they cost? I tried 4 years ago to get that information from CPS Energy, and it's not available because of competitive considerations. We're going to close DLE number 1 and 2 coal-fired plants because pollution controls cost too much. Was that financial assessment prepared by the same person who gave us smart grid economics? CPS has sacrificed their credibility on the altar of politics.
All right, well, thank you,
Yep.
Van. Okay.